She was sitting on the bench like she was waiting to stop existing. Head down, knees pulled tight, the silver marks across her cheekbones, the ones Jorn had seen glow faintly in station corridors, were almost completely dark. He stood in the doorway of the observation deck with a repair kit in his hand and said nothing. Neither did she. There's a story that happens in the quiet, between the kind and the quietly falling apart. If that's the kind of story that stays with you, subscribe to Stellar HFY Stories. We'll be here when you need it. Now, let's go back to where this started. 3 weeks earlier, the observation deck had been just another item on his maintenance rotation. Panel 7C flickering again. Jorn Tate did not have a glamorous job. He had a tool bag, a rotation sheet, and a pair of boots that had been resold twice. He worked the 0200 to 0600 shift because nobody else wanted it, and because, honestly, sleep had never been much of a friend to him anyway. Years now. He'd stopped counting which year it started and just accepted the circles under his eyes as a permanent feature, like a watermark on old paper. Station Verith 9 was a diplomatic hub, which meant half the corridors were off limits to maintenance staff during daylight hours, and all the good food in the commissary was reserved for delegation members. He didn't mind. The quiet hours were his, the empty decks, the hum of ventilation cycling through its low, even breath. Panel 7C was in the observation deck, floor-to-ceiling viewport, deep space laid out like something someone had spilled and never cleaned up. Beautiful, if you had time for beautiful. He didn't usually linger. He lingered that night because there was someone already on the bench. She was 6 feet 7 inches if she was an inch, folded into herself anyway, knees pulled to her chest, silver white hair loose around her shoulders. Silvathy, he recognized the markings immediately, the faint constellation of silver freckles across her cheekbones that every briefing document described as bioluminescent, indicative of nervous system state. He'd read that once in a safety memo and promptly forgotten it until this moment, because right now those markings were doing almost nothing, barely a shimmer, like stars seen through cloud. Her eyes, when she turned toward the sound of the door, were violet, deep violet, ring darker around the iris. The color of something exhausted past the point of showing it. He recognized that too. He didn't say anything, just moved to panel 7C, opened the housing, replaced the flickering driver module. Took 4 minutes. He was good at his job. Then, because the bench was genuinely the best seat on the station and his feet hurt, he sat down at the far end of it. Not close, just on the bench, facing the viewport. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, pulled out his rotation sheet and pretended to review it, though in truth he was just watching the stars do what stars do, which is exist without needing anything from anyone. 20 minutes passed. "Why are you still here?" Her voice was low, careful, the way voices get when they haven't been used in a while. Jorn considered the question with genuine honesty. "Lights fixed, but the bench is nice." A pause. He could feel her looking at him the way you feel a temperature change. "You're sitting on a diplomatic observation deck at 0300 because the bench is nice. Best view on the station." Another pause, longer, then almost despite herself, "There is no one else on this deck." "I noticed." He looked at the stars. "Didn't seem like a problem." She had no answer for that. He didn't need one. He reached into his tool bag, past the repair kit, past the spare actuator clips, and pulled out the blanket. It was old, worn soft at the edges, when the original color faded to something between gray and blue. He spread it over his own lap with the casual ease of a man who had long since made peace with being slightly embarrassing. He caught her looking. "It's not weird," he said without turning. "Everyone has a thing." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. He didn't know, couldn't have known, that she hadn't spoken to anyone voluntarily in 6 days, that every member of her delegation had been gently or firmly redirected away from her quarters on the advice of her medical attaché, that the word shutdown had been used in hushed Silvathi in hallways she wasn't supposed to hear through. He just knew the bench was nice and the stars were out, and the quiet felt like something worth keeping for a few more minutes. Something is already shifting between them. Slowly, the way the best things do. Subscribe to Stellar HFY Stories so you don't miss where this goes. Days didn't pass between them. Odd hours did. Beat 3 had no announcement. It was just, she came back the next night, and the night after that. Always the bench. Always 0300. Always the same posture, knees drawn up, silver markings dim and quiet against her pale lavender skin. Joran didn't question it. He had his rotation. Panel 7C was technically finished, but there were always things to check on a station this old. A loose housing here, a vent calibration there. He was thorough. His supervisor had always said so. Hey, he brought the blanket every time. He never offered it, never made it a thing. It just lived on his lap while he sat at his end of the bench and she sat at hers. And the stars did their indifferent, gorgeous work through the viewport. He noticed on the third night that she'd moved 6 inches closer to the center of the bench. He said nothing. On the fourth night, she was already there when he arrived, sitting in the dim emergency lighting with her violet eyes fixed on nothing. The freckle marks across her cheekbones dark in a way that made something in his chest pull tight. Not with understanding exactly, just with recognition. He knew what it looked like when someone was running on the wrong side of empty. He sat down, pulled out the blanket, watched the stars. "I can't sleep," she said. Not a complaint, not a request, just a fact, offered into the air between them the way people sometimes speak truths they've been holding too long. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, me neither. Years now." She turned to look at him. He didn't turn back, just kept his eyes on the viewport. "There are treatments," she said. "Healers, compounds." "I know." A beat. "Doesn't help when people try to fix it." He shifted the blanket slightly on his lap. "Helps a little when someone just stays." The silence after that was not empty. Her freckle marks flickered. One tiny pulse of silver, there and gone, like a match struck in another room. He didn't see it. He was watching the stars. She was watching him. The hour moved from 0340 to 0400 without ceremony. Joran had stopped pretending to review his rotation sheet. It sat folded in his bag. He was just sitting now, breathing slow, the way he did when the insomnia wasn't fighting him too hard, and he could almost trick his body into something like stillness. He heard her breathing change. Not sleep, not yet. Just the slow loosening that comes before sleep when the body begins to negotiate. Miss, he didn't move. Her head dropped, just slightly, chin toward her chest, then caught. She straightened. Her freckle marks pulsed once more, a little brighter this time, then steady back to dim. He kept his breathing even, kept his gaze forward. The viewport was full of starlight. No station lights out here on the far observation side, just deep space doing what deep space does, which is hold everything gently and ask for nothing. Her head dropped again. This time it didn't catch. Yet it came to rest against his shoulder with a softness that seemed to surprise even gravity. He felt the slight cool of her skin through his sleeve, felt the exhale that followed, long, slow, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than the lungs. He did not move. He barely breathed. Then, with the careful patience of a man who understood that some things break if you reach for them too fast, he lifted the worn blanket from his own lap and drew it, slowly, without a sound, across both of them. The freckle marks on her cheekbones began to glow. Not brightly, not all at once, but steadily, a soft, silver light returning to a face that had been dark for 11 days, spreading across the constellation of marks like something remembering what it was supposed to do. He watched it happen in his peripheral vision and did not say a word. The viewport held the stars. The stars held the silence. And the silence held the two of them. A maintenance worker who couldn't sleep and a princess who had been running out of time, together under one worn, faded blanket on the best bench on the station. He didn't know what her freckles meant. He just knew she was still breathing. And for now, that was enough. The blanket was still warm when the 0500 ventilation cycle shifted the air, and she stirred, barely, and did not move away. He stayed. That blanket started as an embarrassing habit he'd never explained to anyone. What do you think it meant to her? By the end, subscribe to Stellar HFY Stories. Tomorrow, another quiet human, another world quietly changed. We'll see you there.